I think world leaders have come to realize or are getting to realize the importance of the material that's presented in our reports. And as you're aware, this is going to be a major item for discussion in the forthcoming G8 summit. And it's happening all over. I mean, there was an attempt to bring it up in the Security Council a few weeks ago, as you're aware. So I think the leadership in different parts of the world is also now quite concerned, fueled essentially by the material presented in our report. So I think these are the two channels through which I expect there will be a major impact in the next conference of the parties.
The next question is right here, this gentleman right here.
Hello, Sebastian Berger from the Daily Telegraph newspaper in London. It's a very detailed presentation, very interesting report, thank you very much. Picking up on what you've just said about the world leaders, what level of carbon price would you like to see being set? You've got those, it's very much split on the 20, 50, 100. What would you like to see happen?
I'll let Dr. Bert Metz answer that, but let me say something. As far as the IPCC is concerned, it doesn't like to set anything. We only evaluate and assess in its entirety what each of these variables represent. It's for the negotiating committee and the leaders of the world to decide what they really want. But Dr. Bert Metz may want to say something on that.
Well, I wanted to say, first of all, the same thing. We analyze that at what carbon price can you expect, given the studies, a certain amount of reduction or change in the different sectors. What the report says, to take one thing, is that for carbon prices of $20 to $50 per ton of CO2, now that's the lower end of that is roughly what the carbon price in the EU emission trading system is right now. If that's achieved, you could see a large shift in the electricity generating sector away from high carbon to low carbon sources. And you would see a lot of the options that we evaluated and that I presented earlier on to become economically attractive. Now we're talking about the time frame that should happen between now and 2020, 2030, so that sets in motion investments that would, of course, have implications also in the longer term. But that's the crucial thing. A carbon price would make certain investments. A carbon price in the order of $20 to $50 would make a lot of the investments in mitigation economically attractive.
I think this gentleman here. Let's switch to the desk mics. I think they're going to be better than the roving mic.
Thank you. Marwan Mark of Interpress Service. I have a question on this whole lifestyles issue. Clearly, there's a broad spectrum of the lifestyles we have before us. Have you figured out what kind of sacrifices societies in the developed world have to make to reduce the carbon emissions, and what kind of problems they're going to encounter from the developing countries who are aspiring to live the same kind of lifestyle that those in America or those in Europe have?
Yeah. Let me address this issue. I think the very first point in addressing this issue, the report, as far as I know, and as far as I know the regime under which we analyze this report, is there is not a matter of life, it's a sacrifice. It's a matter of changing lifestyles to still get the same benefits that you will get. And that is, if you look at one of the view slides I show, I try to establish the fact that we can do development in a much more sustainable way than we have done it in the past. We have certain examples of certain countries that have achieved even improved income with emitting less greenhouse gases. Now, these reports demonstrate those examples in which countries can achieve a low GHG emission lifestyle, but at the same time get the same economic benefits that they can get. So therefore, we definitely try to show you that you can do that. The second point I just want to ensure is that we should not view it in terms of sacrifices. The main metric that we should follow is the matter of income. And if you look at the greatest contributor to GHG emissions is the energy sector. Over the years, within the past 30 years or so, you would notice that a lot of energy suppliers come into the world, but with lesser greenhouse gas emissions. So therefore, we should not view it in terms of sacrifice. It's a matter of changing lifestyles. Of course, there are problems. I'm not saying it's easy, but the report also discussed them under the form of the barriers that I've mentioned.
I'd like to add very briefly one example of a lifestyle change that is not a sacrifice. We were meeting in the hall next door for the past 4 days, and at some point the delegates asked to turn down the air conditioning because it was too cold. And by doing that, we changed our lifestyle, and we made a contribution to the climate, and were more comfortable actually.
Let me follow up on that. And some of you might not remember when President Jimmy Carter was the president of the U.S., he appeared on television wearing a cardigan, and he advocated that everyone should turn their thermostats down in the winter, and you use cardigans instead of, sitting in T-shirts. Now that's a change of lifestyle, which I don't think takes anything away from your comfort. To give you another example, Prime Minister Koizumi has asked everyone in Japan not to wear neckties to work, and it's caught on. Now this means you can perhaps accept a different threshold of temperature for your own comfort. One example that I'd like to give you, which is a personal example, and I'm not saying that the IPCC is recommending that. Please don't report it as the IPCC recommends so and so. What I'm saying is, if people were to eat less meat, perhaps they would be healthier. There are huge co-benefits in doing that. And at the same time, you cut out a lot of the emissions that are associated, for instance, with the beef cycle. Right from the moment you produce beef, you transport it, you refrigerate it, sell it in retail stores. So, these are lifestyle changes where you're not giving up anything. In fact, you might actually gain by taking some of these measures. All we are doing is asking society to reflect on these possibilities and come up with solutions that suit their individual or societal conditions.
Next question. Do we have anyone on this side? Sir? Use the microphone on the desk.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Frank MacDonald from the Irish Times in Dublin. You've endorsed the nuclear option as one of the low carbon alternatives, and that is, a fairly controversial finding, particularly in relation to radioactive waste. The report skirts over this issue, and yet, if we go for the nuclear option, we are basically requiring future generations of humanity into the unimaginable future to look after the waste that the radioactive waste that nuclear power inevitably generates. How do you reconcile advocating the nuclear option with advocating sustainable development?
Well, first of all, we do not endorse and we do not recommend. We only analyze and we lay out the various options. And in this energy field, that included the nuclear power option. And we've laid out what it can achieve, at what cost, and we have discussed the various other aspects connected to it. And in the summary for policymakers, we summarize that, including the reference to safety, weapons proliferations, and waste. So we are not sort of